kick us off here, I am Lindsay Klinger. I am the event manager with the Telos Alliance. I am very happy that all of you are here with us, and I can't wait for my colleagues to share everything about iQs. I'm going to introduce them again for those who joined most recently. And then I will go over a couple housekeeping items to help make this the most wonderful webinar experience and able to have that poll questions and that interaction with you. So, like I said, I'm Lindsay from the Telos Alliance. Here with me is my co-host, Angie Robertson. I also have Kirk Harnick, who is going to be our moderator and carry us through. And then we have Milos Nemchek, who is the project manager for iQs. And then on to some of those housekeeping items. For any of your questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will try to answer as many as we can throughout the webinar or at the end of the webinar. But if there's any that we don't get to, we will do our best to reach out to you post-webinar to make sure that we answer all those for you. In addition to that, we have polls. There is currently one up on your screen, and we would really appreciate your engagement. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it helps make us have these webinars a little bit more engaging for you. And then lastly, don't forget, if you attend this webinar, make sure that you register to upgrade your SBE certification credit, and this webinar will count towards that. So let's see, without further ado, Kirk, let's roll.
Let's see if I can share the screen here and share sound and optimize for video. And you should have that on the screen now. So the iQs Virtual Console, mix anywhere, on any device. You know, Telos Alliance has been informing broadcasters of a new way to mix audio live and literally from anywhere. Pretty much what you'd expect from from my colleagues, the people who invented audio over IP specifically for broadcast back almost 20 years ago now. In this webinar, we're going to see what Axia iQs actually is, where and how it's installed. Yes, we're going to demo that, and how you can use Axia iQs to quickly add audio consoles to your station or at home or anywhere else, really. If you look closely at these pictures, in some of them, you're going to see that the mixer is actually presented to you in a web browser tab. It's not an application. It's a web browser tab. That's how it's accessed. It's controlled in your browser using any modern browser. It's HTML5, so anything modern is going to work for you. So what's the back end that makes all this possible? What is the browser actually controlling? What device or what software, what system is driving the browser display in real time? And it, as we pointed out, works on a bunch of different type of devices as long as it's got a browser. Well, meet the Axia iQs. S stands for software. iQs is the virtual audio console that's controlled by your web browser. Here's the simplest graphic that I could make to describe it in its two different forms that it's available. So we're showing these two options here. To make iQs accessible to everyone, people who maybe not have the IT skills that some others do, we're offering the iQs Virtual Audio Console pre-installed on a little hardware platform called our AE1000. That's the application engine 1000. It's a small 1RU box. It's only two connections are needed on it. A 12-volt power supply connects in the back. I'll show you that. It's a locking connector. It's very cool. And a gigabit Ethernet connection to your LiveWire or AES67 or combined network. This option, the AE1000 engine with iQs installed on it, pre-installed at the factory, it's simple and easy. It takes literally a couple of minutes to get started with it. The other option is the iQs Virtual Audio Console software installed onto a Linux PC or server. It's delivered as containerized software, and Milos is going to be describing that more shortly. You may have heard of the Docker software container platform. Well, Axia iQs is fully Docker compatible. It's not really a virtual machine per se. It does operate virtually as, again, this software container. Containers don't work quite like a virtual machine. Milos is going to give us a little comparison a little bit later on. iQs simply installs into that Docker engine platform. In a few minutes, we're going to show you. Milos is going to actually run you through the scripting to do that. We provide a couple of scripts, you paste them in, and as long as your environment is correct, bam, in about 4 minutes, Milos is going to install an iQs audio console. Now, as for the browser, as I said, any modern browser will work fine. It can be on a desktop PC, a laptop, a Surface-style computer, or even a tablet or a smartphone. And it really doesn't matter the operating system as long as it's got a modern browser. It just needs that standard browser to access the iQs Virtual Audio Console elsewhere on your network. So we're kind of curious. Milos and I are curious to ask, what is your level of expertise on containerized software? Rate yourself, if you would, here. And I'm going to answer this myself to add to the knowledge base. By the way, we're going to present the answers to our polls in this webinar. We're going to present those answers at the end of the webinar. So go ahead and answer, and you will see, you will get an idea of how you and your colleagues and your friends answered these questions. All right, let's move on now. I'm going to show you the piece of hardware that you can get, the AE1000, Application Engine 1000, with iQs installed. All you have to do is attach it to your AOIP network when you get it, and then you browse to its default IP address. You configure it for your network preferences, for your network, and then you configure the sources and the destinations just like you would on any iQ console. We'll take a look at that in some detail. In fact, I'm going to show you a video in a few minutes that has me actually installing it here at my office. So to me, this is just a great way. I do plan to install some of these at my own broadcast stations. I really like this option. But there's another option. Milos is here to describe what's going on this screen. Milos?
So yeah, the left-hand side is just a little box. It shows kind of a Linux prompt, if you're familiar with the command prompt. And on the right-hand side, we have a graphic that represents, I guess, symbolically what we have here is you have a bare metal server, and installed on the server is going to be your host operating system. It should be Linux, has to be Linux. And then from there, we'll have a Docker engine application running. And from that, you can have containers running. And the graphic shows 6 instances of iQs, each container running.
Nice, nice. I like the part. We're going to show a video not only of me installing the piece of hardware, the AE1000, but you installing, using the scripting on your platform at your office, installing this in just a few minutes. So let's look at the features of iQs. If you're unfamiliar with the iQ series of consoles, well, you're going to be more familiar now. And if you are familiar with iQ consoles, the feature set in the console is basically the same. So it's browser-based, HTML5, therefore accessible to any device, any platform, any operating system. It can be bought for anywhere from 4 faders up to 24 faders. It has 4 program buses, program 1, 2, 3, and 4. Plus, our 4th program bus has some special magic to it. It's a record bus. There's also a telco bus. And there's a preview bus that's separate, of course. You got the whole preview system. It also features auto mix mic balancing, and you can set the individual weighting. So if you have a active morning show and you really don't have the time to watch your faders exactly, well, you can turn on auto mix or bring these different faders into auto mix, and it'll do a great job of doing that. And you can give somebody a little more importance than the others. There's also mic processing available for all mic sources. Any mic source coming in, you get mic processing. And there's 3-band EQ for any source, including stereo sources. So all that is available to you. Continuing with the features, Milos, you're going to tell us a little bit about the technicalities features here.
Channel input confidence meters on every fader. It's a pretty large confidence meter, actually. Works with Axia Pathfinder to be aware of the sources it produces, and also do some remote controlling if you wanted to build the logic in Pathfinder to remote control the iQs. It supports AES67 streams, which are also SMPTE ST2110-30. Works with any AES67 LiveWire source on the network. Studio and controller monitors are built in, and profile context-sensitive soft keys can be used to activate talkback, start delivery system events, and perform other special functions. And
that those soft keys, they show up on the browser, on the GUI, so you can program those and touch them and have them kind of do what you want.
Right.
Cool. So what are some applications for the iQs? Well, obviously, audio mixing without having to have a physical surface there. You can have a temporary studio anywhere, for example. You can have distributed or remote workforce, and we're going to show you that, hey, more than one person at a time can be adjusting the same console. That's a pretty cool idea. Home studios don't need to have a purpose-built mixer anymore. This is great for small studios, for desks, even mobile around the radio station or outside. And you can have, as I said, multiple simultaneous users. All right, let's see how the paradigm here is actually different from what we've been doing. Now, as engineers, and many of you, like me, have been building radio studios since, well, the 1980s, or maybe some of you even earlier. If we look back in time, we'll see that, it used to be that the radio station audio console was the center of everything. The station was, and the studio was defined by the console. In fact, if you looked at the wiring of a console, it turns my stomach. I know. I don't think I was responsible for this, but I could have been. Everything even wired to the console in the studio. And the time didn't change that a whole lot. Even through the 1990s and early 2000s, it was the same. The console was the center focus of the studio. Your station kind of lived and died by the console. In fact, even when we moved into the early digital world with AES-3 or AES-EBU audio, it didn't change that much either. The console was still the center of everything. So graphically, things used to connect to the console like this. Truly was the center of our operations. Now, this next graphic, I know it's going to look a little complicated because I put a lot of stuff in there, but it's actually, in a way, in terms of audio flow, it's actually simpler. The audio architecture of today is actually network-centric. It's no longer console-centric. Audio consoles, in fact, are added or attached to the network, so you get mixing functionality as an add-on to the network infrastructure. The network-centric architecture changes our basic thinking about audio flow and studio construction. It also opens up some valuable options for remotely working. That means whether the user is remote to the station or in the station, you can, or if the station is in the data center, you can remote control all this stuff, and the console with all of its wiring is no longer the center of that. So you can see how we have a network-centric system here. And network duplication or redundancy is quite doable. There's different ways to get that done. So everything doesn't fall upon that one Ethernet switch in the middle. So, but if you've been familiar with audio over IP, you know that these are all options. So let's look at a modern problem and the modern solution. We need to mix audio. We need to mix audio maybe for on-air, for production, for voice tracking. Maybe you have added an HD2 or HD3 channel. For streaming, maybe you're doing something different on streaming that needs a little mixing going on. Or on-demand audio, you need to top and tail some things and get some mixing done there. But you don't want to build new studios. Either you're out of space or there's no budget to build new studios these days. So you can add mixing and control to an existing AOIP network just by adding a browser-controlled mix engine. We have some friends over in England, Broadcast Bionics. They went around and surveyed air talent in Europe, and they asked them, what would you like to see in the studio of the future? What kind of audio console? Do you want it bigger? Do you want it smaller? Do you want more buttons and knobs? Do you want fewer buttons and knobs, more controls? And the majority of the air talent actually kind of had an idea of what they wanted. They said, nope, none of that. What we want is more cushions and daylight, to paraphrase. Cushions and daylight. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that they want less audio console. They want fewer buttons and knobs. They want more stuff just to work automatically. And that's why we work so hard to put auto mix into the console. Air talent wants to focus on the content and not focus on the controls. They want the minimum interface required to do a great show. And they just want to focus on that flow and the content. So this is where Axia iQs can actually move your station forward. So here's an example of Axia iQs running on a PC in an existing control room. This is Vince, Big V, friend of mine, and we added Axia iQs so he can mix another station right here. Sometimes we have sports or other things going on another station. You can do sporting events. You can add something for holiday programming. You can monitor and control other stations in the cluster. Some easy ways to do that. And the computer that he's looking at right there, that he's touching the monitor of, that is just the computer that they usually use to access the internet in the control room. There's nothing special. It's not an app. It's just a browser window. Here's another idea. It can replace a legacy audio console. So it has a smaller footprint. It returns desk space to you. So you could put several of these in a room if you wanted to. And so it does fit in small rooms, small desks. And again, the PC doesn't have to be dedicated to this function. The PC can certainly do other things, either at the same time or other day parts. You can even have people do this in their office. So this is my friend Chris Green. He's using his existing office PC as a control surface. iQs works with touchscreen or mouse. The touchscreen experience is really cool. Our engineers have designed this to be extraordinarily touch responsive, feels just right, and it's very easy to do. I'll demonstrate that in a bit. And any desktop PC, laptop, tablet, or phone can control an Axia iQs mixer. All right, it's time for another poll question. How do you imagine using the Axia iQs Virtual Console at your facility? I gave you a few ideas there. Maybe you have some ideas of your own, and you can choose what you'd like to tell us about or what you imagine. Again, we'll have these poll answers or share those with you in just a little bit. So now we're going to look in. Yes.
Just wanted to interrupt. Sorry, just to go back to your statement about the design of the UI. You mentioned a little bit, not specifically, there was an effort put into making the touch interface large enough for finger press. It was specifically designed for touch, because sometimes you have designs that don't do that, and so the button is a small area. So we specifically designed it for that.
I noticed that in setting it up in my own office, whether I set it up on a small Microsoft Surface PC with a rather diminutive display, or I set it up on a 27-inch touchscreen monitor, that was amazing. Either way, it worked great. And then I used it quite a bit on computers that didn't have a touchscreen, that just had a mouse. And it was easy and quick to navigate around that way too. So thanks, Milos, to you and to the other people in the design team for designing this for touch. I think that works very, very well. So let's dive into the tech and where the iQs goes. So let's review a bit. Audio over IP begins with the IP network. To that, we add some in and out, some devices, some GPIO devices, audio in, audio out, what we might call baseband audio, whether it's analog or AES EBU audio. That's how we connect non-AOIP devices to our AOIP network, like speakers and microphones and such. Next, we're going to add more sources and destinations, maybe computers like an automation PC running an Axia IP audio driver, connecting those applications directly to the AOIP network. And by the way, when I say connecting directly, when your automation system plays out audio and you're using the Axia IP driver, essentially the same ones and zeros that are on the hard drive representing the songs that are there or the audio that's there, essentially those same ones and zeros appear on the network. There's no interference to that quality of audio. And so if you haven't switched to AOIP yet, when you do, oh my goodness, the audio quality is going to improve. Your signal noise ratio just looks fantastic and the clarity becomes just perfect. As other AOIP devices are added, like mic processors, of course, they'll connect to the network as well. I'm showing the Voco 8 there. Then you can add an audio console along with its attendant mixing engine to the network. Now we now have a functioning AOIP network with a surface for controlling it and the mixing engine. And once the required audio sources and destinations exist on the network, then we can add more audio consoles like this. This is an Axia iQx. It's a physical console, but the mix engine is built into it. We can simply plug that in the network and start mixing more things. And if we need a microphone there locally, we can add a node and a microphone, or wire that microphone to another node elsewhere in the building. So the Axia iQs, again, has that mixing engine built in, and it works with LiveWire and with AES 67 IP audio simultaneously and quite natively. Now, let us move forward with another example here. Let's take away that physical surface and add what is actually now some legacy stuff. Here we have a tablet running an app. It's not a browser. This is an app called Soft Surface, and that's one way to control an existing console in the Axia world. You can also add something like IP Tablet. Again, this is an app that you customize to run in a Windows tablet environment. There's also our legacy product that we keep updating it though, and that is Pathfinder. And there's Pathfinder Core Pro now, which either runs as an appliance or in a virtual environment. And you can build your own mixing panels, fader panels with that. But again, it is an app. And it's with any of these solutions, it's not so easy to make them work remotely. They're intended to run on the LAN where the other Axia devices are. Now, what if we add that thing I just snuck in there? And that is the AE1000 with the iQs software running on it. So you add that to the network, and then we add any computer with a browser to the network, and now we have another audio mixing console right there. It's pretty cool. Let's look at a bigger environment here. Let's get several AE1000 application engines there with the iQs installed on them at the factory. And now we can add some more computers, laptops, devices with a browser. So we can add a laptop connected, wired in, but we can also, this is not running live wire to and from these devices. It's just browsing. So we can put these things on Wi-Fi. We can put a tablet or a phone on the Wi-Fi network and control what we're doing with those mixing engines. Now, that's the hardware mix engines. Let's look at how you would do this really the same way with the iQs software container. Milos, tell us what we're looking at here now.
Similar to what we saw before, you've got the bare metal server, the host Linux operating system, the Docker engine, and the instances of containers, iQs in the graphic, but it also could be other products that we just recently released VXS to, I believe. But these are all containers that can reside within that Docker or container deployment.
Good deal. I'm going to skip past that slide and bring us right into this. Again, it works with any modern browser. So that's what it looks like running on a tablet environment. A little closer look at the screen shows you this. Now I'm showing my tabbed environment here, but you can easily hit F11 on a machine or just expand this to full screen. The tab goes away, my shortcuts go away, the URL bar goes away, and you have an absolutely full screen audio console there on your computing device. So let's look again here. And I'm repeating myself a couple of times, but I want to drive home this totally new concept. So the iQs can be deployed in an AE1000. You can buy this hardware from us. You can, at the factory, we'll pre-install. So there's no muss, no fuss on your part. We'll pre-install iQs on it. And the other option, Milos, is what you alluded to earlier. Just take us through that again real quick, what we're looking at.
The containerized method, so bare metal, Linux OS, and what we use is Docker engine.
Mm-hmm.
There's other platforms that can be used because Docker is useful in other platforms as well. But right now, we're just referring to Docker engine and various containers at the moment, just iQs as shown in the graphic.
I'll point out that Docker is kind of a standard for executing containerized software and helping developers to build it. There are other engines out there that are also Docker compatible, and so we don't want to necessarily hold you to one brand, but we do say that the iQs software container is Docker compatible. Would that be about right?
Yeah, and so Docker really is a packaging system that doesn't lock you into any platform. And you'll see in our language, we will continue to refer to Docker engine because one of our roles is to help educate our customers. And instead of teaching you everything, we'll teach you one path. You go and learn that, and you would be successful. Some of our customers will be familiar with other platforms, and there's no reason why they couldn't successfully deploy iQs in those other platforms.
Got you. And I'm showing 6 instances of iQs software containers here. You can run one, right? Or you can run up to how many? What do you think?
Depends on the cores available on the server. The simple answer is you need 1 core per iQs. It's a little more involved than that. You do need like a core for like a base system. So like I can't remember what the rule is, but let's say 4 iQs's would require 5 cores.
Okay. And and the underlying system is doing some Ethernet handling as well, isn't it, among these different containers?
Correct.
Okay, good deal. There are a couple of different ways to buy this, and we'll go into more detail on this later on, but I just want you to get an idea in your head, friends, of how you can do this. The AE1000 engine with iQs pre-installed at the factory, that is a buyout. So you buy the engine, you buy the iQs software pre-installed. The base system comes with 4 faders for the console, and you can add additional 4 fader licenses to it. You can add those later. You can add them at time of purchase. It's just adding licenses to it. The other method is iQs as a software container, and you can either have a buyout of that or you can subscribe to it. So as the buyout, again, you'd buy the 4 fader audio console software, and then you can add additional 4-fader licenses, or for a lower fee, but an annual fee, you can subscribe to those. And there's some benefits either way, depending on your organization, your comfort level, and just, if you want more CapEx or more OpEx, there you go, is probably a good way to put that. So let's jump into me actually installing this. I got an AE1000 from Telos Alliance with iQs installed, and I pulled it out of the box, and well, here's my experience. Hi, it's Kirk Harnack to tell you about how you can get the iQs virtual audio console pre-installed on this hardware. This hardware is the Telos Alliance AE1000. AE stands for Application Engine 1000. When you order the AE1000 with the iQs software pre-installed, what you get is this diminutive box. Of course, 19 inches rack width, only one rack unit tall, and look, it's only 4 inches from front to back. By the time you add power and Ethernet connectors, it's still under 6 inches from front to back. There's no fan in it, it doesn't even run very warm, but it's amazingly powerful. You can put up to a 24-fader iQs virtual audio console in here. That's right. Plus it has extra buses on it, all the buses you'd need, program 1, 2, 3, and 4. It has a recording bus, it has a telco bus, it has an offline bus, and it also does audio processing. It will process your microphones, of course, for downward expansion, compression, and de-essing. Plus it has stereo EQ available, 3-band parametric EQ for each of the inputs if you want that. There's also a monitor section and a headphone section and a preview monitor as well, plus a studio monitor section. All the things that normally come with an iQ console are available in this iQs software virtual console on the AE1000 platform. Let's hook it up. So once we have the AE1000 with the iQs software installed, we can hook it up to power and Ethernet. I've got this Ethernet cable here already connected to my Axia network here in the office, and I'll take the power coming from the 12-volt power supply. Now this is a locking connection here, so it screws on, won't come off at all. And now the power indicator comes on. Once it's up and running, you can browse into the unit using the default factory IP address, which is 192.168.2.29. Just set your computer to the same LAN address and browse right into it. From that point, you can set the IP address to what will be compatible with your own internal Axia, Livewire, or AES67 network. Now that you've set the IP address, just browse to that address. In my system, it's 10.216.0.29. And you're challenged with a login. The default is user with no password. Now the next thing we'll want to do is set up some sources and some shows. So we can go to sources, and I've already set up a number of sources that exist on my network here at my office, including a host mic, a computer that can play audio for me, the output of my Omni 11, and some audio receivers that exist in my rack room, plus my Zip 1 and some audio from my Zipstream hardware. We'll also want to set up a show to bring up. And so I've brought up one called iQs Demo. And in this one, I've assigned the host mic to come into all 4 program buses. I've also brought in some tuners, my Tivoli FM tuner, a couple other receivers that I have, Zip 1, even the Omni 11 comes up. And I don't have any sources on any of the rest of the faders. I guess I didn't need all those faders, did I? The iQs can also be used with Telos phone systems, and you would set that up here. There's also a monitor section, so you can decide what you're going to monitor by default when you load the profile. And you can also send the preview into the rest of the monitor feed if you like. You can also set up which external inputs will come up when you bring this profile up. All the usual selections that exist for an Axia iQ console also exist in the Axia iQs console. Now we've selected that. The iQs demo profile is active. So let's go ahead and look at the outputs now. I've turned on some outputs, program 1, 2, 3, and 4 on my network. You can choose multicast or SIP unicast. SIP unicast is useful if you're in a server environment in a public cloud space, especially where multicast isn't allowed. You can also give it a channel IP address, channel address for Livewire, or an IP address for AES67. And you can choose what type of payload it is, standard stereo or AES67. Okay, we've seen enough setup. let's go see what it looks like when we bring the Surface up. So I'll click on Surface, and it's connecting, synchronizing the state of the console, and oh my goodness, there we are. Let's look at the iQs Virtual Audio Console in operation here. I've got a Microsoft Surface computer that's being used to access this iQs software running on the AE1000, and it's got a touchscreen. I also have a large monitor here so you can see it more easily. Of course, a large touchscreen monitor would work just as well too. I'm going to bring the monitor volume up, and you can hear the monitor come right up. I got 4 different radio stations running here on these 4 different faders in the 4 different program buses. And you can see I can switch, watch it, I can switch to different program buses and hear these different radio stations. I can bring this one up and down, for example, all the way down, all the way up. I'm just touching the touchscreen. I can also double tap to bring it right up to 0 dB if that's a quicker way to do it. Again, you can grab anywhere on the orange bar here to turn this up and down. There's an example. You can turn it off, of course, turn it back on. You could also use the mouse to do the same thing. I'll show you over here. Turn it off and turn it back on. We can also put something in preview. There, we've put that in preview. I've got preview mixed in with the monitor. We can turn the preview level up and down separately, just like that. Take it out of preview here. And we can also mute the microphone, mute the speakers by turning the microphone on like that. And in fact, we'll turn off all of this. And if I just talk, I have the microphone, this microphone right here, through here on the Axia network, and you can see my voice coming through the monitors as well. So lots of options here, and it works just like your regular console does, like any iQ console does. The iQs Virtual Audio Console running right here on the AE1000. Thank you very much, Kirk. Appreciate that. Hey, so let's look at the software deployment now. By the way, I know we have questions coming in. We're answering a few of them by typing, and we'll take more of the questions near the end of our webinar here. Most of us have heard of, and many of us have installed and used applications that run on virtual machines. This technology, I was doing some research, virtual machines have actually been around since the 1960s in one form or another. I'm much more familiar with them, from, I guess, probably the last 15 or 20 years. A more recent development is containerized software, and a popular standard is known as Docker. Now, containerized software doesn't need a whole virtual machine to run in. Rather, software containers are executed by a Docker engine, and that itself uses the resources of a single underlying operating system. Milos is going to describe this just a bit more about how containerized software is kind of the future of where the computer services industry is going.
Yeah, so in microservices, as you pointed out, it's an efficiency. So instead of a VM where you create a whole new machine for each, and we'll say microservice or widget. If I have a widget product, and you use the VM approach, you create a whole VM and all that resource is consumed for that single widget versus containerization, where the widget is, or the container is present in the single OS and is separated from other widgets or containers through user space. And you can have separate IP addresses for each widget within the OS. It's all part of the Docker engine. And a lot of IT forward companies are moving in this direction, and Telos decided that this was a way to better share software with our market space, and we're in place to help educate our customers on how to be successful with these containers.
And I should say there's plenty of external resources on getting you started with Docker or containerized software. If you just do a little Googling on the internet, you're going to find plenty of videos and courses about it, anywhere from 15, 20 minutes introduction up to 4 or 5 hour course in containerized software. So it's just a more efficient way to handle smaller services that still remain isolated within their own containers.
Yeah, when I first started with containers, there's a typical programming, a hello world type program in containers, and that was my first container. So
let's now that you've seen a bit about the 2 different deployments, and I know you haven't seen Milos yet deploy one, we're going to look at that. But just thinking about this question, which of the following deployment options would you prefer? And there are several options there, including I don't know. And if you don't know, that's fine too. So if you would answer that question for us, that would be really helpful to our thinking. So installing the software container. Well, Milos and I got together to install this. It can be installed in this virtual environment. It runs as containerized software on a Linux platform. And this can be done locally on premises, or it can be done in a data center. So without further ado, hey, it's Kirk Harnack. I'm here with Milos Nemchik, who's the project manager for iQs, our product manager. Hi, Milos. Welcome in.
Thanks for having me, Kirk.
So one of the ways that you can have iQs, the audio console that is remotely accessible with a browser, is by running it as not quite a virtual machine. It's running as a software container on what kind of platform?
On a Linux machine.
Okay, Linux machine. So let's, if you would, just take us through this. We're going to show a screen here, and you can tell us how this process is working. Here we go.
Right. So I'm at a prompt for logging into the Linux machine, and I type in my username, my password, and now I've got access to it. And I'm going to zip on over to our online documentation, and I'm clicking on the Docker container documentation. And because I've already pre-read that, I know exactly where I need to go, but it's suggested you read all this material. What I'm scanning for is the Docker setup, and midway through the page is a string of text that I want to copy, and I'm copying it there.
And that is a script, a single line script, right?
Single line script. So I've pasted it into my prompt, and I hit enter, and now it's asking for my super user password.
Okay.
And then it proceeds, and it's checking various elements in the Linux machine to see that they're there, and if they're not, it installs them. And this just takes a few seconds.
Yeah, folks who've installed programs with Linux before, they'll recognize this process, right?
I think so. It's very familiar, yes.
Yeah.
And so it's checking for example, like the Docker engine, if other utilities that we like to use are present. And again, if it's not there, it tells you that it's there or not there. And if it's not there, it installs it. And so now it's asking for the login to our repository, our online repository.
Okay.
What happens to be at quay.io. And so I'm giving my username and my password for my access. And so
one prerequisite is that a person would already need to have an account with quay.io to get this.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And it's asking for a network setting, Telos Mac VLAN, which I'm not deploying in this example here because I'm just doing a single instance of iQs. And so then it asks me what product I want to install, and I'm type 1, which is the iQx console. And it's giving me questions for certain things like the name of the instance. I just typed in XYZ as a call letter. So no, I'm done with the script. That's it. It did everything. And now the Linux machine is a certain IP address, which I happen to know. And I'm going to type that into the URL. And it's just a 101.49. And there it is. There's iQs. And first thing is to log into the iQs products. Let's create a source profile, which allows me to ingest audio from the network into the console. And my favorite generic Muzak source profile, I'm typing in Muzak, and I'm going to pick an audio source in my test environment here. And program 1, or the monitor section of the AE1000, which we're also talking about. And all the defaults are good. I'm going to also configure an output.
Okay.
So I can hear the audio without any output, right? So in this case, I'm just going to enable the monitor output. I'm going to give it a LiveWire channel number, enable it, and hit apply. And now my monitor section of the iQs is in my network, and I can pull it up in my headphones or speakers. And here I'm on the user interface. I've pulled Muzak up. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to assign it to program 1.
Oh, look at that.
Don't forget to turn the monitor on. That was the last bit. And now I can listen to Muzak as I read the rest of the online documentation and figure out how to make this product work.
Oh, my goodness. So, all right. So what we just saw, folks, was not a complete tutorial on how to install iQs in a Docker environment, a software container environment. What we saw was that you can do it if you have all the prerequisite information, you can do it quickly. There is some prerequisite information to do, including getting an account with Quay.io, which is our repository for the software that you get it from. Yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. And then you just made a very simple console. After the software was installed and running, right? Now we're going to access it with an HTML with a browser, and you established one source and you established one output. Obviously, you got to have one in, one out to see what you're doing, and then you browsed to the console, and there you had it.
Now, one thing we did not cover in that video was the licensing. It does require a license. And so without the license, what I received was a 4-channel mixer, fully functional, except we have tones that are generated every, I forget the time period, say 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But the license process, you would install the license server, get a lock request phase, send that to Telos. Telos will give you the key, and away you go.
So it looks like, honestly, if you have the prerequisite stuff available, you have a Linux machine ready to go, and you can go ahead and install the software, and you have your license ready. You went from start to finish there in, I think it was just under 4 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Milos, thank you for the demonstration. Again, not a complete tutorial. We'll have other resources for the more complete tutorials, but I wanted to show folks that it can be done. You just installed an audio console.
Yeah, in 4 minutes.
In 4 minutes. Whoever thought we'd be doing that? Milos Nemchik, product manager for Axia. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kirk.
All right. So we have a poll question, another one ready for you. Again, we'll give you share the answers to these at the end, or the responses. How would you prefer to purchase your iQs software as a one-time buyout option or as a yearly subscription option? Which of those makes better sense for you and your organization? Now, I know it's probably going to depend on the price, but the prices, if you analyze the pricing, let me just tell you, they're pretty much what you'd expect for either option. And with the subscription, you do get perpetual, or as long as you pay for the subscription, you get our Telos Care Plus. You can add that to the buyout option. We'll explain that in a few minutes. So when Axia iQs software consoles are used on premises, right? They're there with your AOIP LAN, and they're being controlled on premises. Then Livewire or AES67 AOIP can be used for both contribution from the computer or laptop, and it can be used for monitoring. Now we have we have a Windows driver for that. If you're using a non-Windows environment to control it with, then you'll need some hardware to give you monitoring, or if you want to add a microphone. So you can run the IP audio driver in a laptop, on a computer, if you want to monitor or even contribute. If you don't run the IP driver, then you can have an Axia X node there connected on the IP network and hook that to speakers, microphone, that kind of thing. What about when you are remote? Well, a remote PC can easily connect to and control an iQ virtual audio console back at the facility. Using a VPN connection would be preferred for security reasons, but there are ways to do it without a VPN as well. Now, iQ doesn't contain its own built-in audio codec, but any audio codec can be used as long as there's an audio client at the remote end and something to generate that at the studio end. There are software IP codecs available, certainly, as well as hardware IP codecs for remotely accessing any studio in the station. Buffering at the remote PC should be kept to a minimum, so you get as live as you can. These codecs could even consist of, let's say, a Telos Zip 1, as I'm showing here in this. You could use another Zip 1 at the remote location. You could use something like the Lucy Live app at the remote location if you want a real lightweight solution there. Another option would be to run a browser, run this on the studio PC. In other words, run that browser on a studio PC and then remotely access that using desktop access software that does transport audio. Something like TeamViewer, Splashtop, DW Service is my favorite. Those are examples of that kind of functionality. So again, the IP codec's not built in, but we sell IP codecs, so there's other ways to certainly get that done. Milos, you're going to review for us the different deployment locations where iQs would make sense for different people.
Yes, so on premise, you've got the A1000, which equates to one iQs. That's the easy, can't get much easier than that. Then there's the iQ server deployment where you bring your own hardware and I guess you have to install the Linux OS on it, or whatever OS, but it should be Linux. iQ server deployment in a private data center if your corporate entity has a data center. And then iQs server deployment in a public cloud data center such as AWS.
Gotcha. Okay. And of course, different solutions will make sense for different people at this point. Whether installed on an AE1000 hardware platform or as a software container on a server, the iQs can be controlled by different browsers simultaneously. This is kind of cool. This allows mixing collaboration, I should say, even when the users are in different locations. Now, on the video where I showed you and I was moving fader up and down and you saw it moving up and down on the big screen, that was two different browsers on the same computer, but that was two different browsers. Let me show you different browsers on different computers here. The Axia iQs virtual audio console can be accessed from more than one browser at a time. Here we're accessing it with one browser on a computer and a second browser on the same computer and another browser on a second computer. Then across the office, we're accessing it with 3 more browsers on 2 more computers over there. And what's cool is they all track together, so you can work together. Watch, I'll move this one up and down, and on another computer elsewhere on the network, it also moves up and down really fast. So people can work from anywhere and collaborate together with iQs. Now, I told you we were going to look at some of the other options available. There are several ways to get the iQs virtual audio console into your facility. One is a buyout of the AE1000 hardware and the iQs pre-installed for you at the factory. A buyout option of the iQs containerized software, that's also available, as we mentioned earlier, or a subscription to the Axia iQs software. Now, the buyout options each include a 1-year service from the Telos Care Plus program. You can, we'll explain that in a minute, what that means, Telos Care Plus, but each includes 1 year with that. And that would also give you some help in getting it set up when the time you're going to need that extra helping hand is going to be at the beginning. The Axia iQs subscription option includes Telos Care Plus for the duration of your subscription. So I hope putting it in some couple of tables there on the screen helps make clear what your different options are. Now, what's this Telos Care Plus? Well, service level agreements are indeed the future of broadcast for a lot of broadcasters, for many, many broadcasters right now. In other words, people have been asking us, broadcasters have been asking us now for a few years for service level agreements. And we're here to support you with our Telos Care Plus SLA, service level agreement. It is free for the first year with your purchase of iQs, with your buyout purchase. With Telos Care Plus, you always have the most up-to-date release of iQs. But that's not all you get. In addition to software upgrades and updates, you have priority access to Telos Alliance's support team. You get also discounts on remote assistance if you need that. You get free priority repairs and more for both hardware and software. Now, Telos Care Plus helps to keep your broadcast operations running smoothly. It does provide peace of mind. If you're a broadcast operation and honestly, your nearest contract engineer is a 3-hour drive away, this is something that you may really want to have. It's going to be good for both a station owner, a station operator, and for, let's say, a contract engineer who needs to come in and get started right away on fixing a problem. Telos Care Plus also preserves the value of the investment and provides ongoing financial reassurance to the purchaser. All Telos Alliance hardware products and many of the software products come with that free Telos Care Plus contract, either for the first 90 days or in the case of iQs, for a year, depending on the product. This allows us to efficiently assist with installation, configuration, and troubleshooting when you need that the most. There's a 1-year minimum contract for annual renewals thereafter. You can buy multiple years. In fact, you can get a discount for multiple years. Again, the benefits include priority phone support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a response time of 4 hours, remote assistance, first hour free, and additional hours at 50% off, free software upgrades, updates, and license support, free repairs, parts, and labor while under the SLA contract if you have hardware, and your choice of priority pair in 1 to 2 days or advance swap. That's a pretty interesting option for people, that advance swap. And free product loan during the period of repair. So that describes the Telos Care Plus. So let's look at some key takeaways here. We got a few of these, but we're almost done. iQs is a software audio console. Know that. It's touchscreen optimized, as Milos suggested earlier. The audio mixer GUI right in your browser. Any desktop PC, laptop, tablet, or phone controls this mixer, and it can work with a touchscreen or a mouse. It's available in these different ways. It's pre-installed as a Telos Alliance, on the Telos Alliance AE1000 application engine, or as Docker software container on your own PC or server hardware. It supports LiveWire and at the same time, if you like, AES67 source audio. It will also put out LiveWire standard streams or AES67 1 millisecond streams. And essentially it has the same I/O specs and functionality specs as the iQ series consoles. I'm going to put Milos on the spot for 1 second here. And Milos, is there anything that you think I have forgotten to mention here about the capabilities of iQs? If you know what an iQ console does, you probably know what iQs does, right?
That's correct. If you know what iQ family does, you know what iQs does. I guess the point is iQs is our step into real virtualization and what that can do. And this is only beginning. It's going to get more fun.
So I'm going to turn off the screen share and go back to our pretty faces. And we have, well, first of all, I guess we have some polls to look at, some poll results. So Lindsay, thank you very much for popping up the poll results here. The first question that we're going to answer is, what is your level of expertise on containerized software? And the most popular answer was my answer too, actually, beginner. I know very little about containerized software. And that's, again, different from virtual machines, containerized software. The second most popular answer was intermediate. I know a decent amount about containerized software. That was about a fourth of you. And the next most popular answer was, I don't know about containerized software. I can't wait to learn. Okay, good. That's positive. Appreciate that. And the least popular answer, only 7% of you said, I'm advanced. I have a full understanding of deploying containerized software. So there we go. We're going to be learning this together, it seems. You know what? We've done this before, right? We all learned about ISDN back in the early 90s, early and mid 90s. And then we all learned about audio over IP over the last 15, 16, 17 years. And now we're going to be learning about containerized software. So the next question, how do you imagine using Axia iQs Virtual Console at your facility? The most popular answer, 50%, said providing off-site program control and mixing in a home or remote office. That's about what I would expect. About half the people want to do this control from home or a remote office. Let's see. The next most popular answer looks like adding or replacing additional dedicated studios. Adding or replacing dedicated studios. So you build a small room, and instead of the focus being a hardware console, it's some kind of PC or laptop with browsing into iQs somewhere. The next most popular answer, adding more mixing capabilities to existing studios, maybe for a second station, second stream, HD2, or maybe your console's not big enough and you need to add some faders to it. Well, that's one thing you can do with this. Next looks like putting mixing capabilities at regular desks, non-dedicated studio rooms. Okay, that's interesting. And I know there are actually some bigger networks that are looking at doing that right now. And then next most popular, convenient mixing on the go within our facility. So maybe you can carry around your phone, and if you hear something wrong or you realize, oh, I need to start something, you can whip out the phone, open the browser, and there you go. And the last, the least popular was downsizing studio space. Okay, I'm sure your commercial landlord is glad to hear that. You're not going to downsize the studio space. Let's see, did we have another poll answer, Lindsay? Yes, we do. Which of the following deployment options would you prefer? All right, the number one answer, and these are actually, a lot of these are pretty similar in the number of answers. The number one answer was, I don't know. Good. That's why we're here, to help figure that out. I don't know. And we're happy to have conversations with you, of course, individual conversations afterwards to help figure out, well, what deployment option might be best for you. Next most popular was iQs pre-installed on a server platform, on the Telos AE1000. So that's my favorite, because I like to just pull things out of the box and plug them in. And so that's the next most popular. Third most popular was install and configure the Docker software containerized on on-premise hardware. So do this at your facility, but do it yourself in your own Docker container, your own server platform. Next was install and configure iQs software in a conventional hypervisor virtual machine. Now, we're not saying that we're offering that, at least not at the moment, but that's an option that some people want. That's the fourth or fifth most popular answer, though. And finally, install and configure the Docker software in a cloud environment like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, or similar. So that was actually the least popular, but still 9% of people gave that answer. So again, most popular, I don't know. Good for you. And next was on the AE1000. Lindsay, I lost track. We got one more or not? I see you nodding your head. We got one more. Oh, this is easy. How do you prefer to purchase iQs software? As a one-time buyout, that was by far more popular, about 71%. And as a yearly subscription, well, still not insignificant at all. 29% said they want as a yearly subscription option. So good.
So Kirk, if I can interrupt real quick and
Please.
put Milos on the spot again. So Milos has been busy in the background answering a lot of questions. He's gotten through 26 of them.
Oh my goodness.
We still have over 30. So we have 4 minutes till the end of the webinar. We have a couple options. Milos, if you wanted to answer some of these live for a few minutes, if people want to stay on and hear those answers, or we can respond post-webinar via email.
We'll do a little of both.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'd like to get one comment in before Milos answers a few questions, and that is iQs, not by far, not our first audio console, obviously. And, a lot of us who work at Telos are in radio, have been in radio, are currently in radio. A lot of these questions ask about things that maybe aren't in iQs yet. And we're not making any, road promises, on down the road, but we do need to hear your questions. It does exactly what we said it will do in this webinar, right? And there are things that you probably wanted to do that are definitely on the roadmap, or with your support, with your help, with your interest, will be on a roadmap at some point. So if I didn't talk about what it will do, it probably doesn't do that yet. Milos?
Thank you for that, Kirk. Thank you for that, Kirk. I'd like to say thank you for all the questions. It's very informative, especially it confirms some areas that we'd like to explore or that we're road mapping. I would like to answer all those questions and expose everything, but I'm not allowed to, because as Kirk said, sometimes we may roadmap something, and then in the research and development, we find out it's not possible. And if we said, oh, we'll have that to you next month, and then for whatever reason, we can't deliver, it's bad for us. And we don't want to make promises that we can't support. So I do want to answer one question that's been multiple times, so I can't organize the questions, but there has been several questions about using your existing hardware surface. So it's an Element, it's a Fusion, it's an iQ with this engine. That's not part of iQs today. We're exploring it, and all these questions help us to inform us that we should explore it some more. I can't say that it will be a reality, but it's something that we'd like to look at, especially after all these questions and your interest in here. 2 minutes left. What other questions were common?
I see a number of questions that ask about possible interaction between iQs and existing hardware, controlling one with the other or the other with the one. And I think you started to answer that. At the moment, it doesn't do that, but that certainly is something that we're looking at doing, because there are, with other consoles in the iQ line, there's certainly similarities in protocol there that make that a possibility.
Right, and there's both questions really. There was replacing the engine, so you use your Surface to control this virtual engine, and then there's also been questions about using the interface to control the console. It might be an Element console. We had one question, I answered it, I think publicly, to control the iQ. On the iQX, which is a derivative of iQ, that is, we're in the process of releasing 1.4 software that will introduce that HTML5 interface, but iQX is not iQ. There's a difference between the two, and that is the processor, and I don't believe we'll be able to fit the HTML5 interface into the IQ platform, into the core, which is the host of that service.
So if you have an IQ console that uses a Core 16 or a Core 32, you're not going to get the HTML interface to remote control it. Now, you already do have a basic remote control in IQ Core consoles, Core 16, Core 32. It's not pretty, but if you need to turn something on or off, even if you need to adjust mic processing or something like that, you can do that.
Right, and there's IP Tablet, which is an application that provides you that soft control, yes.
Yes, exactly. But you mentioned the iQx. When we come out with version 1.4 of that, that will contain the same web GUI that we've seen today.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I want to, for those who need to know, because I don't want to surprise anybody, iQs and iQx, which is hardware with a built-in mix engine, those will accept as sources live streams, Livewire live streams, Livewire standard streams, and AES 67 1 millisecond streams. As far as the streams that it will produce the standard stream from Livewire, and it will produce the AES 67 1 millisecond stream. But the iQs and iQx will not put out a Livewire live stream.
Right, and there was a question about that, and that's a nature of virtualization. Virtual machine is not a real-time OS.
Yeah.
We're 1 minute past. Is there like a witching hour where the doors just close? I don't know what.
No, that's
My first
all up
webinar.
that's all up to us. If you want to, we still have a good amount of attendees. So it's up to us to decide if we want to tackle some more, because now we're up to 44 questions. Are there a few in here that we could tackle quickly and give our audience some answers? And if you decide there are, Milos, make sure to read the answer or read the question, sorry, because the audience cannot see that.
Okay. Can you show getting the iQs console on a browser window without going into the setup?
I can't. We're not in a position to show that right now, but there is a way to do that. There's a way to create a shortcut that lets you just go straight to the fader GUI without going into all the setup. Yes, that I had to ask the same thing of Milos the other day.
There was an earlier question that was exactly that, just worded differently. So yeah, it's the username is Surface and no password, and that goes directly to the HTML5 interface.
Steve Rubin asked a question, where do we get the Docker file? Steve, there are some instructions on our website. Maybe Milos can tell us where it is, but you sign up with Quay, QUAY.io, but there is a format that you must follow for your username at Quay.io for us to make everything shuck and jive correctly. And so, Steve, there's a web page. Milos, can you or someone advise us where to go on the Telos Alliance website for people who are interested and want to sign up or express their interest?
It should be there should be a web page for iQs, and from there you should be able to get to.
Yes, you're right. There is
a manual, and now we're also transitioning to online manuals, and so the iQs manual is just an online one. There's not a PDF you download, and then from there there's various links to help you navigate through hopefully all your questions.
So yeah, I'm not seeing the link just yet, but we'll try to get that for you, Steve Rubin and others, so you can go see how to sign up for that. And as Milos alluded to, yes, you can sign up. You can get access to the actual Docker itself and try it out. There are, I think it's worthwhile to warn, there are important prerequisites in your operating environment where you're installing this. For example, if you're in Windows and you download the Docker appliance engine thingy for Windows, no, don't do that. This needs to run on Linux that's running on Metal. And which Linux is it that we're recommending at this point?
Ubuntu 1804 and 2004.
1804 and 2004. Okay, somebody did mention they had a problem with 2004, but we can address that separately.
I noticed, yeah, it's a new one for me, so I had to dig into that specifically outside of the webinar.
Milos,
Chuck,
sorry. I noticed several people have asked if we can monitor audio using the web interface. Did we already answer that one?
And that answer is not at the moment. Somebody asked, well, can you use WebRTC audio for basic monitoring or a mic input? Not at the moment. And I really can't say when that's coming, how soon that's coming. Obviously, that is a technology that we're looking at, and we understand very well how to use WebRTC. In integrating it into this particular situation is not child's play. So I'll leave it at that. That's
awesome. Thanks for answering that.
And Tom Hansen asked a great question. There it is. To change, is it possible to change the layout of the console on the HTML page? Meaning add and remove buttons and functions, place them somewhere else, etc. Not today, but just the background, the original research project that became iQs, that was a goal to create a palette builder or something, so you can build your own console. I keep reminding the team that is something that we'd like to tackle. But right now, I mean, there's a lot of people interested in, as just by the questions have been asked, a lot of things. So it's just the level of priority, which one comes first. But again, not today, Tom, sorry.
so many questions.
Yeah, and some of them are repeating. So here's another WebRTC question.
Oh, is there a limit on the number of LiveWire stream sources like the Hardware IQ series? Blessedly, the answer is no. There's not a practical, there's not a limit that you're likely to hit, right?
Right. Well, so I believe the reference is to the IQ Core platform, which there was an 8 channel limit, and starting with the IQX, and it also applies to IQS, is that we've removed that 8 limit. And now it's, there's, what is it, 24, that you can have up to 24 fader channels, but plus you have some monitoring inputs. And so the limits for inputs, I believe, is like 32. And then we have a 24 output limit. And those are the limits based on the product, not some arbitrary, not arbitrary, but the network limit of the core.
So you can fill up every possibility that you see in the IQS configuration interface.
We have to, because there's no IO in this, right? I mean, there's no XLR on the back of this, so it all is LiveWire.
Okay.
So yeah, if we had a channel that you couldn't populate with LiveWire, we didn't do a very good job.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no audio input on the back here.
Someone asked, are you at liberty to disclose pricing? And that pricing is always through your local dealer. I don't know, where you are in the world, so you need to contact your local dealer. Cheaper than any broadcast console I've ever bought.
There was a question not related to this about a Linux driver that's through a partner, Paravel, yes.
Paravel, yeah. So yes, I mentioned about the IP driver if you're on a Windows platform. So the question may be related to, I have a Linux machine. I want to browse to this on a Linux machine, and I also want to listen to LiveWire audio and perhaps contribute LiveWire audio from that same machine. So yes, you could run the Linux IP audio driver, which Telos does not sell directly, but it's available through Paravel Systems, through Fred Gleason at Paravel Systems. He maintains that product.
So there was it's in the Q&A, but it's more of a statement, and I'll just reiterate it that, if you want a remote control, we've answered it already, but Element Fusion IP tablet is a product that helps remote control those consoles, so hardware consoles. Just reiterating that statement. So someone that got stuck, that's a support question.
Trent Muldrow asks, will it run okay on Docker running in a VM? And you a little bit answered that to some degree, Milos. I've been cautioned against that, but what's your say?
Yes, a hypervisor 1 class VM, not a 2. You should be successful in this, but it's also dependent on the hardware. I mean, if you grab something out of the garage, it's already handicapped. So modern day servers, I'm sometimes surprised what what you can buy modern day and what it can accomplish.
So we want to, we can't guarantee it running at all properly on a type 2 hypervisor, but on a type 1 hypervisor, yes.
Yes.
Did I get that right? So you've got the hypervisor like VMware, and then you've got a Linux instance running on that, and then you run the Docker on top of that.
Now there's some fine print in regards to you have to set up the virtual machine to have dedicated allocation for CPUs and whatnot.
Okay.
Because we are doing audio through this, so it's not going to perform well when it's not being given priority.
Exactly. That this is even though there's not a live stream involved on the output, there are available on the inputs and speed of servicing these requests from the network. I mean, a live stream coming in is, what is it, 4,000 packets a second? Always get confused. It's 2,000 or 4,000 packets per second. It's a bunch.
Can't recall. Jason Powell, this is a good question. So one and only one instance on an iQs on the A1000. That's correct. A1000 provides you one instance of iQs.
Well, some people are asking about authentication or security. I know that within the company, we have a demo unit, and if you have a Telos Alliance email address, you've been allowed to authenticate using that email address, and then you gained access to the demo unit that people around the world and Telos employees have used to demonstrate this to themselves. Is that a technique that others could possibly do, or do you have any best practice for remote authentication? Someone asked about LDAP specifically.
Well, I mean, security, there's the secure, and also there was there's a question about network interfaces and having two network interfaces and routing. So there's the approach where you can handle this outside of the product itself. So either security or being able to access the product through an audio over IP network or a business network, or when you're trying to access it remotely, we have routing, and those aspects can be controlled outside of the product, where you're applying security features, and that's kind of what you made reference to on how it's a Telos email address that's required to access that demo version. That's outside of the product. That's some interface that's applied there outside of the product. But some customers are looking for help and therefore want these things embedded in the product itself. And so to that answer, there isn't right now like dual NIC support in iQs that would allow you to have a container and dictate, this interface is my audio over IP interface, and I connect that into that network, and this one is to my business interface, and that would allow the so-and-so in their office to access this. That's not embedded in the product, but you can achieve it outside of the product. We are exploring adding that functionality into the product because customers are just looking for the product to handle that for them, as opposed to them trying to stick on the solution. And same with security.
Kevin asks, you mentioned voice tracking remotely. How would the audio from remote get to the studio? Are there delay issues? Well, as we said, there's currently no IP codec built into iQs. So you would have to use another solution, either from Telos or from some other company, to handle audio in each direction. Now, I would point out that if you're just voice tracking, many automation systems nowadays have remote voice tracking built into them. And that would probably be, if you're just voice tracking, that would be a better, more convenient, more slick solution than using iQs to remote voice track. I can imagine doing it either way. My own radio stations, we use an automation system that lets you remote voice track, very slick, very convenient remotely without even touching the console. So now if you're doing like live work, if you're on the air live, that's where iQs may be more necessary and more important for you, and then you'd want to come up with a way to get voice back and forth, whether it's a Telos Zip1 or some other IP codec.
Armin, I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name, sorry. Is the control restricted to mouse or touchscreen, or will there be a possibility to use MIDI or a device running an OSC app? That's kind of similar to the previous question we answered about can you use a Axia console to control this? So not at the moment. These questions help us to encourage us to explore that more, but not at the moment.
So, well, thank you for all these questions. And, you know, I had a feeling we would get lots and lots of questions like this. I'll reiterate, if you're late to the party, I'll reiterate. iQs right now does what we showed you. And if there was something else it did, we would have showed you. So,
Kirk, so I'm thinking we're 15 minutes past. We still have a good handful times 4.
Well, some of them are duplicates. I mean, there's several ones about hardware control.
yeah,
Correct. So I'm thinking that maybe it's a good idea to wrap this one up.
I think so.
And our promise to you is that within the next couple days, we will, luckily Zoom auto-magically collects all the questions for
Good.
us.
I was going to ask if
So
if those were captured.
we haven't
Yes.
had to be typing to capture them. So Lindsay and myself will go through these and make sure that the appropriate questions get to the technical, you know, there were some technical questions, there were pricing questions, there were SLA questions. So we'll get those out to the experts within Telos to get back to each of you within the next couple of days. So otherwise I have a feeling, you know, they keep going. I try to answer some in the background. I would like to shout out to Jake Alderman, and I've been pinging him to help me answer some of the registration and demo license questions in the background. So thank you, Jake. I say we call it and we get back to everybody that has open questions via email.
Can I answer one question?
Oh,
Sure.
Go for it.
It came up and it just flew off the screen. Jamie asked, what happens to the screen when you add lots of pots or fader channels to your console? And the interface based on the width of the display will provide you a certain amount of faders based on your width. If you have more channels enabled in the product, what happens is there is what to call it, like a page shift. So you can shift to the next grouping of faders.
Yeah. And there's an algorithm that figures out how many faders to display to you. And with the current version, it is what it is. The algorithm does what we think it should do. But in some future versions, I'm told that we may give you some options as to how skinny or wide or how many faders to try to show
Next version.
to bias that algorithm.
1.2.
There you go. Okay.
It's already in the roadmap. I can confidently say that's roadmapped.
Okay. Good.
In
Good.
the bag.
Okay. Well, thanks. We still have a lot of people on. So thank you all the attendees for joining us today.
Indeed.
A couple of housekeeping things. I might be stepping on Lindsay's toes. Do you want to go?
That's okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. So in the next couple days, look for an email from us, and that will include a recording of this webinar. Lindsay will also send out, I think this happens also auto-magically. As soon as you exit the webinar, you will get a survey. So I know we asked you a lot of questions live within the webinar, but we have a few more that we'd love your opinion on. So you'll see that as soon as you exit. Again, you'll get the email with the recording. And as I mentioned, we will get back to all of these open questions within, hopefully by the end of the week. But if not, very, very soon. And if you are in urgent need, if we aren't getting back to you quick enough, you can always email inquiry@telosalliance.com with your immediate question. And that email is monitored 24/7 around the world. So you can get an answer there quickly also. And we didn't mention, but iQs information is also up live on the website. So be sure to check out the website for any other information that you might have. Am I missing anything?
I think you got it. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And so excited to present to you guys today another new product, and we can't wait for next month.
I was just scrolling through the attendees who are still here, and I'm just so delighted to see so many of my personal friends from around the world. It's gratifying. Thank you for attending. And, like any Telos product, we start out with a product, and, features get added over time to almost everything that we've ever made. So, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. And sorry, go ahead.
Just thank you to all the questions. I really appreciate the questions, and I'm going to spend the next 2 days answering them via email.
Okay, I think
right.
that wraps it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.